All right, everyone, welcome to our weekly workshop. Today, I got something really awesome for everyone. I got Dawn and Mike here. They are the co creators of a game called Swordcery. It is an incredible looking game. Currently on wishlist right now on Steam. I'm currently right now dropping in the chat. Hopefully, it's going to everyone a link to the Steam page of which they're at and their Twitter profile for their page. Um, Real quick, these guys are really experienced devs. It's not like they are making their first game ever. They are both animators that have started their careers in it looks like television. They're trainers, but they also worked for legitimate companies. They've worked on Call of Duty, Black Ops 3. They both worked on God of War. They have a lot of experience as animators in the AAA industry, and now they're working on this Swordcery game, and you could see a lot of that kind of rub off on this particular game, and it's incredibly exciting to have them there. Mike, Don, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know I did a brief introduction, but I was wondering if you guys, whoever wants to go first, can kind of fill us in on your actual history of getting into game development before you get into Swordcery, because we'll spend a whole lot of time there.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having us, man. I guess I'll go first. When I was a little boy, of course, I saw Toy Story, and like every other animator out there, I immediately wanted to make that. That was like my dream. I wanted to work at Pixar. But as I grew up, I've always been like a big gamer, and so naturally, my career kind of got more and more towards maybe I want to work on games. And after I graduated college, I actually didn't go to college for anything game related. I went to college for graphic design, but I always wanted to be an animator. So after that, I pursued animation with Animation Mentor, because my mom was like, "Don't go to traditional college; you'll go in mountains of debt." And I didn't believe her, but then she was like, "Yeah, just do this first and see how it pans out." And
Gotcha,
it turns
gotcha.
out she was right. So didn't accrue mountains of debt. Got the animation training, and then eventually, I think I applied for like 73 jobs out in California.
Mm-hmm.
One of them hit me back. It was a 2D animation job. I was a 3D animator, and I was like, well, I guess I got to make this work. So I moved out there in short notice, started doing that while doing more animation schooling with iAnimate. And through that, met one of my teachers and got recommended to go work at Activision. And then I started working on Black Ops 3. And throughout the project, I got to know many people, one of which introduced me to the team at Sony. And then I got brought on to work on the God of War 2018 God of War. And that's pretty much how I got into games. And that's also where I met Mike. I was working at Sony Santa Monica.
Heck yeah. And yeah, I'm Mike. When I was a little boy, I played a game called Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, and that like blew my mind that you could have like this cool just game in 3D. And I was like, how do they even do this? But like at the time I was just, a small child, so I didn't know how any like 3D stuff worked. Then I started getting good at art, and I was like, okay, maybe I can do something with this, and then maybe I can incorporate this with video games. So I wanted to be a concept artist, and then I'm colorblind, so I was like, maybe I can't do that very well. So let's try something else. Then I wanted to be a 3D modeler, but unfortunately, the college that I went to didn't support as much of that stuff, and that now I actually teach at that college, and I'm trying to change that so to get more of the a real usable curriculum in there. But then yeah, and then so I was like, animation, it has like a low barrier to entry, just in terms of like you're just moving stuff and then you're just playing around with timing and posing and stuff. And then I just started focusing in on that because I was like, I think this is the only one that I could really like make happen with what I know in 3D. And so for like 2 years, like the last 2 years of college, I just really focused in on that. And My career isn't as wide as Don's, because I essentially like at my last semester in college, I started applying to different places, and then I miraculously got an internship at Sony Santa Monica, and then they onboarded me. They're like, "Hey, you're gonna work on God of War." I'm like, just straight out of the gate, like that's what's gonna happen here. Okay. And then I had to meet their expectations and up my animation quality. And then I worked my way up to junior animator and then mid-level animator there throughout that project. And that's where I met Don. And then now we've decided to move on to the indie scene.
Yep. Sat next to each other and then decided making an indie game would be the right choice.
Okay, so you guys are talking so casually. Oh, I worked in Call of Duty. Oh, I worked in God of War. Like, seriously, you worked on Call of Duty and God of War. Okay. So, as an animator, Don, we'll start with Call of Duty, and then you guys can tell me more about God of War.
Sure.
So, you got brought on. What specifically did you do as an animator for Black Ops?
So, I was a cinematic animator, which meant that I handled any unplayable cutscenes, and I also handled what they call there as character vignettes. So that's like third person, like just chilling out characters in the background, like maybe having a drink or like crowds, stuff like that. And that was pretty much it. And I initially, when I got brought on, I had no idea how to use Motion Builder. Never used Motion Builder in my whole life. Only knew how to use Maya. And they're like, "Hey, you're going to use Motion Builder." And I was like, "Do you know how you use Motion Builder?" I was like, "Yes." And then I went home and I Googled it and I learned it in one night to be able to perform the basic tasks. And my buddy Jay there basically taught me every day how to use Motion Builder. I'd be like, "Hey man, so like, how do you like do this in Motion Builder?" He'd be like, "Okay, it's this." And then I'd go back to my desk and I'd immediately have another question and be like, "Hey, so but also what about this?" So it was a lot of learning the program on the fly, and also a lot about cinematics that I didn't know. But fortunately, like they were very accepting, and I just tried to pick it up as fast as I could,
Okay. Now, I messed with Motion Builder back in like 2004. That was a long time ago. What I do remember of it is that Motion Builder, in essence, is a mocap sort of system where you can take character animations and apply it to your particular characters that are rigged, and then they inherit kind of like the weighting. Sort of like how Unity has the mechanism system, where as long as your characters are rigged a certain way, the animations can be applied, and then you can kind of like take timelines and start stitching them together. Exactly. Is that a good explanation of what Motion Builder is?
It's really just like a great overall tool for editing mocap.
Okay.
And you can like keyframe animation in it as well, and oftentimes you do. But Maya, I would say, is a stronger tool for that, especially nowadays. But yeah, it's just overall like a better, faster tool for dealing with mocap.
Okay. And so you're building these characters on the side. Like these characters, what is the complexity of these things? Are they like 10,000 triangle characters, 5,000 triangle characters? Or are these like full-fledged, beautiful, amazing hero characters that we're looking at?
In Call of Duty. So we worked with like LOD models, so like low level detail. And then we would also export those anims and implement them in game, where then they would be placed onto the higher quality rigs. Okay. So whenever I was working in Motion Builder, we would have like some really, really like if for those of you who've never like worked with LOD models before, basically it's this really low poly. Maybe some of the joints are like the mesh itself is missing some polys and stuff like that, just to make the system run faster.
Gotcha.
But then once you export the data, it gets put onto the high poly model.
Okay. And how long did you do that for?
That was, I believe I landed that gig in late 2014, and I worked at Treyarch until September of 2015.
Okay. And then you guys ended up joining Sony. Well, first of all, did you know it was going to be God of War that when you applied for it?
Well, I had like I have a buddy that worked there, my friend Melissa, who I met through iAnimate class actually, and she ended up getting a job at Sony Santa Monica. And at the time, I was taking a break after working on Call of Duty, and she was like, "Hey, you should come interview for this game I'm working on." And I'm like, "Well, what game is it?" And she was like, "I can't tell you. You have to interview for it." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Well, it's Sony Santa Monica. It's probably God of War, but they haven't put anything out in a while, so maybe it's something different." So when I went to interview, they were like, "What do you think we're working on?" And I was like, I think I was like, "I think you're working on an Egyptian God of War." And they were like, all their eyes were just like, "That's pretty close." That's pretty close, dude. And I was like, "Okay, cool." But then, yeah, I got accepted, and then they told me what I was working on. I was like, "Oh, that's like super cool."
Yeah.
That I guess, yeah.
And how about you, Mike? Like, did you have any idea?
I had no idea throughout the entire hiring process. Like they interviewed me a bunch. I never got that question that Dawn got. They just like the first day I was hired, like they brought all the interns into a room and they're like, "So do you guys know what we're working on at all?" And everyone's there just like, "No, it's just a nice little internship." And they're like, "Yeah, you're working on God of War, and we're doing E3 soon, the E3 announcement. So you're probably going to be making assets for that." And I'm like, "Oh, the pressure's on."
Yeah, that was nuts.
Well, I remember reading a story that, even when they showed the game to Sony, the execs, they weren't that excited about it. They were somewhat disappointed. And I don't think they even knew how amazing that game was going to turn out, how just revolutionary, how everybody was going to just latch onto it immediately.
Yeah.
It's quite incredible. So what did you guys do specifically in God of War?
So
whatever you can say. I mean, NDAs excluding or anything.
Yeah.
So for that, we basically did cinematics again. Like, so it'd be those just non-playable cutscenes, but we also did what they called at Sony POIs, known as points of interest, and that would be like when Atreus would like run up and look at a puddle and be like, "Oh, like the boar went this way," is like a canned animation, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked on moments like that. And story, basically overall, it's like story moments.
I got you.
Yeah,
now,
and we got assigned like a lot of seconds of animation to do for that. Like it was like thousands of seconds per animator.
It was insane.
We only had like 6 cinematic animators on the team, and then just a bunch of that is in there. And part of the job was also writing outsourcing notes, because that's just an unreasonable amount of animation for that few humans to do. So we had to write a lot of notes, send those to outsourcing, and get those scenes back and implemented, or like and pump them up in quality, because sometimes they come back a little bit questionable. But yeah.
Now how much of that was mocap data and how much of it was done by hand?
The majority, I would say, is mocap data for like any reasonable, like, if you're just talking, like any dialogue heavy scene, that's going to be mocap. But like if you have some big stuff, like I had the scene where Baldur punches Kratos over the house at the very beginning. So like there's no way they're going to mocap some guy flying through the air, so you have to hand key that. And Don had a lot of scenes as well that he can tell you about that need some hand keying.
Yeah. So so mocap works really great for humans, right? But it doesn't work great for snakes. So whenever I had the scene for the world snake, I had the scene where you first meet the world snake.
Oh.
And when he like rises up out of the water and drops the axe back for Kratos. That scene originally just looked like this. It was like a head snake and just shaking, because they had just mocapped like one marker to show where the snake was supposed to be. And they're just like, "Yeah, keyframe that. Make that look like it's part of the scene." I was like, "Okay, got it." But yeah, so anything with like creatures can't be really that. Well, I mean, creatures can be mocapped, but most likely you'll have parts of it that are definitely very heavily hand keyed.
Oh, that's incredible! And you guys were on that the entire time, and I mean, how did it feel knowing that you were making a game that everyone, in essence, kind of thought it was dead, especially after number 3, where you just see a pile of blood at the end of it. So, I mean, how did it feel knowing that you guys were working on a game that the sequel is currently, I don't know when it's going to be released, but it was a trend center. I mean, it's the greatest, one of the greatest hits. It got ported over to PC. Everyone goes nuts over it.
Mhm. Well, I mean, like at the time when we were working on it, we had no idea it was going to be like as big as it is. Like, I mean, of course, we all hoped it would be like an amazing game, but we had no idea it was going to like win Game of the Year, or like just how nuts like the whole like media would just be over this game. Like, I thought we were going to work on like oh, that's a pretty good game, but then it ended up being like the like Game of the Year that year. So it was pretty nuts.
Yeah, and like towards the end of the project, I remember like we were playing the builds and we were like, oh, this is pretty fun, you know, like this is pretty good. And then after release, like the designers put a lot of time in to make everything feel even better. Like up until launch, like they were really pushing on stuff, and it just came together really nicely.
Do you guys ever, I guess, watch any streamers play your games? And does it ever trip you out when they go nuts over it and they get excited?
Oh yeah, totally. Like when God of War like first got revealed, like at the E3 like press conference or whatever, like we were fortunate enough to be there like in the theater, and then like because like yeah, that's like a rare occasion. Like studio members don't normally get to be part of that press conference, but we were there, and like when the crowd erupted, it just felt like unreal. It felt like all this hard work we were like putting into this and all the hours were finally like paying off. And then like I think Mike did too. Like we just like watched like reaction videos to the reveal for like a whole like day.
Yeah, yep. I'll still check one out every once in a while and be like, oh yeah,
yeah.
They still like the cinematic today.
That's incredible. That sounds so fun. Okay, so then, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Swordcery made with Unity, or not Swordcery? God of War. Isn't that a Unity or Unreal project? Right.
No, they have their own proprietary
Okay.
engine in there. Yeah.
I got you. Okay. So then, how does Swordcery come together? What is the concept here? When did this start?
Sure. So it started. I had a dream one night of a knight wielding like a magical sword, except the sword was like a triangular pizza cutter, like that you'd like with the straighted edge, and you'd like use it and you pick it up, and you know. And then the next day I went in and I told Mike about it. I was like, Mike, I had this crazy dream. Like this knight wields like this triangular pizza cutter. And Mike was just like, you idiot, why wouldn't he wield a circular pizza cutter? And I was like, oh, that is like actually way cooler. So then we just spitballed some sword ideas, and we realized that like there's so much room for creativity when it comes to creating swords and like Swordcery powers that can make a whole game out of it.
Okay.
And like we're both fans of like melee combat. We love Dark Souls, we love Zelda, and we love like roguelikes as well. So we just decided, why not try to make a whole game dedicated to melee combat with a roguelike spin on it, and put our sense of humor into it, because we both like are big into puns and wordplay too.
Okay. Well, do one of you want to share your screen, and maybe you can kind of walk us through Swordcery? Because I mean, I could do it, but you know, I think you guys would probably be able to explain it so much better.
Sure. I got the trailer pulled up. I can kind of like show that while talking about it.
Sure.
Let's see here. Can I? All right. You guys see my screen?
It is sharing. Yep, it's there.
Cool. So this was our reveal, or our Kickstarter reveal trailer that happened in November. So this kind of gives you like an overall like look of the game. Let me put the volume down a little bit. But yeah, so the game basically centers around you collecting hundreds of magical swords and just trying over and over to get to the end, kind of like Gungeon, but with swords. And each sword has like its own unique power to be used like in conjunction with the melee combat. And things get pretty wild. Like you can get different sword upgrades that maybe give you like projectiles when you do spinning moves. And we try to make all the enemies very animated as well. So you're like basically just progressing through our world of this is our love letter to melee combat essentially. but yeah, and different systems in there like respawning from like sacrificing a sword. You can upgrade swords, and overall just like pick up passive items to become stronger overall. And of course, we like our cinematics here, so we decided to add in a whole end cinematic for our trailer. This is the main bad guy of our game.
I feel like I've seen that scene at the end of God of War right there, except he was holding a hammer.
Yeah,
That was definitely part of the inspiration. It's also inspired by the opening of Smash Bros. Melee. If
yeah,
you're familiar
yeah.
with that.
Actually, this shot right here, this sword coming down shot is 100% inspired by the original Super Smash Brothers trailer. Link does the same thing, and we both loved that moment, so we created it in our trailer.
All right, so there's so many systems going on in here. First of all, are you guys programming this yourself as well?
Yes, we are.
Oh, incredible. So you guys are artists and you guys are developers as well. Like you wear both hats.
Yes. We wear one hat much better than the other.
Though. Oh, yeah.
We're essentially two animators in a trench coat posing as programmers.
Yeah. Pretty much we learned how to program to make Swordcery. Neither of us had programmed at all. And then in 2018, we bought a Udemy course and we just worked at it for 6 months. And I think we made like the last thing we made before Swordcery was a Plants vs. Zombies clone tutorial.
We know that one. Yes, we do.
Mike and I looked at each other and we were like, "Are we good enough to make Swordcery?" And we're like, "Yeah, I think we're good enough to make Swordcery."
No, we emailed the creator of the course first. We're like, "Do we have the fundamentals down?" And he's like, "Yeah, you can go for it."
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. So when did you guys start? You say 2018, 19 is when this started then?
So 2018, we learned how to code from like January until like July. I think I want to say our first submit for Swordcery sometime in August. So late 2018, I'd say we started.
Okay. All right, cool. And so you got this far. Just looking at that trailer, there was so many different things, like the character system and the art assets and the particle systems that you guys are using, and there's a lot of weapon mechanics and upgrades, it looks like, and everything like that. Like, give me an idea of what these systems consist of. Are they Unity asset bundles, or are they pre-built bundles, or did you create them by yourselves? Are you using custom animations, or are you building them, or are you mixmoing them, or in an instance, like, give us an idea of what went behind this.
Yeah, it's basically a blend. I'd say primarily most of it is our own assets that we're putting in there, because we feel like animation is like our strongest suit, so like if we just kind of take some default anims off the store, then like we're going to kind of lose some of our impact there. I feel the same way about the environment as well, because like you can only get so much diversity out of those existing stuff. But that being said, we still do purchase like environment assets, definitely a lot of effects, like for particle effects and stuff, like that way we're not doing like flipbook animation on like just endless amounts of fire and electricity and stuff, and yeah, so I'd say the majority is our own assets, but we do definitely take stuff from the store.
The most we take from the store is definitely particle effects, because those are like very time consuming to create, and while we could animate those, it's just like these people have made beautiful like particle effects, and they're available on Unity for like decent price, and they're very modifiable too. Like you can like take one piece of like fire from one thing, mix it with something from another, and you have like a brand new effect, and then you can like put your own like spin on it as well to like juice it up even more.
Gotcha. So one of the things that you guys promote is the fact that this thing also has hundreds of swords. Like what does that mean specifically? Like,
So it is our goal. It is our currently our goal to make more than 100 swords for the game. So as you progress through the game, you will like clear rooms and open treasure chests, and out of each one of those will drop a brand new sword. And so what we mean by hundreds of different swords is that like each of those swords falls into one of 10 what we call sword classes, and that means that they share like an attack set and like a heavy special. And while they share those attributes, they do not share their unique sorcery power. So every sword also has an additional magical ability that is completely unique to that one specific sword.
wow,
And-
that sounds like
and-
an. Go ahead.
Yeah,
please.
so that's kind of where we're getting unraveled a little bit, because we're like, we got to make these unique swords, and we have to do it like kind of fast. How are we doing that? So like that's a problem that we're continuing to solve to this day. But yeah, that's generally the idea behind it.
But we have 20 in there so far, so only 80 left to go.
Only 80. It's fine. 81, so we can technically get the hundreds.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
You guys are also, it looks like, building your own enemies as well. So
Yes.
technically not just 81. I mean, you got their weapons as well that they have to use. And it doesn't look like it's just human characters either. It looks like it's a variety of everything.
Yeah, we wanted to kind of sell the world of the game, so we're trying to like make like creatures that are native to one part of the land, and hopefully we can just like make some more for each biome, and then maybe reskin some of them to save some time on that front as well, and make them convincing in other parts of the world. But yeah, we think having a diverse cast is pretty important for a game like this,
Yeah, I mean,
sell the world.
As animators, like this is also what we excel at. Like we are able to create these characters. Hang on, I'm trying to find one thing to share here. We're able to like create these characters that like have personality as they're like living in the world. So they're like, some of their attacks make them mad. Some of them are like just sad creatures, and some of them are very inspired by our arms. Let me find this real fast. But yeah, there's this one creature we have called the Bludge Bramble. It's a plant, and it's definitely not humanoid. And the inspiration behind that was like using our hands to make these like chomping movements for them. Let me share my screen real fast. So yeah, so it's this creature right here. It's we wanted like that like Deku Baba from Zelda feel, but like a little bit more threatening. So we decided to create this plant that was like chompy in nature, and would sometimes do attacks like slam its head on the ground. But this was like reference using my arm, and hurt my shoulder pretty badly.
He's not joking about that.
Like my shoulder was like ruined for like a whole day of like trying to do this. But yeah, so we try to give our creatures lots of personality.
That's something that I'd like to go into a little bit more, because as you talk to programmers, people who are, just, they're not focused so much on the purpose behind a character. They're just like, oh, we need an enemy here. When you guys go about creating another character, another enemy, where do you look at this from? Like, how is your perspective of this character? Because that one you just showed, most programmers would be like, well, we just need an enemy that does this. But you went even further than that, and you had the animatic referencing your arm, and it was just it was almost like you developed its personality first before you even developed a character or a concept behind it.
It's a little bit of both, actually, because when we're approaching, because our game is procedurally generated, so it's like every time you play it, it's going to make a new dungeon, and it's going to populate those rooms in the dungeon with random enemies, So we're when we approach enemy design, we're trying to get something that's going to work well together, when like, so that to be like different pieces of a sort of puzzle, So we have like some enemies that are going to be at range, and then they're gonna kind of just shoot projectiles at you while you're still trying to like dodge and slay a bunch of like smaller melee types. Other ones that like will heal if you don't engage with them. They'll heal other things in the room so that it creates a sense of urgency, you know. And then yeah, so for that plant specifically, we knew that we wanted a stagnant enemy. We wanted one that is just grounded and doesn't move, but is still like a danger. And then we kind of just came up with what sort of creature would be in like this forest, you know. So we decided to make it some sort of plant that's going to be, you know, like carnivorous almost. But then other ones, we're just like, we need a basic character, you know, and then we needed to have it be appealing. So we make Don. Do you have any footage of
Yeah, I do.
our basic boy?
Give me 1 second. I got the perfect video for that.
So like it's a pretty generic parameter, you know, like melee basic boy character, you know, just that we kind of just throw at the player, the kind of sword fodder, you know. So given that parameter, we can do a lot with the personality of it, you know. And
yeah, so like Mike was saying, let me share my screen again. Here's an Instagram post of like our basic enemy. It's this green boy right here. And what he does is he just runs at you and he waits a while and he either dive attacks and you have to dodge it, or he will wait and do like a 2-swipe attack. And for these guys, yeah, we just wanted like an appealing base enemy. So we wanted something that would like not be too hard for players to kill, but at the same time would be like almost adorable to like look at. So that was our goal for that. Just something that would be like a base level enemy. And as you go on, like they'll get harder and harder as well. And then we made a mage variant of them. So these little guys that like will run away and they'll cast fireballs at you.
Okay. As an animator, you see a lot of people who think, oh, it's just animations. It's just, you know, you make a sword swing or you do this or that, no big deal. But I'm sure there's a lot that you guys do that programmers, other artists don't even consider, don't even know about. They don't understand anticipation. They don't understand timing. What are some of the things that you could explain that from someone of your professional level that you can impart knowledge-wise that may just like blow the mind off of some of the people in this room because they never even considered it?
Sure, yeah. I mean, like, one of the things Mike and I consider a lot, is how many frames an attack takes to start, how many frames it is active for, like how many frames it will like hit for, and then how many frames of recovery do you spend in that animation. And this is like kind of like fighting game terms a bit, but also applies to like games like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, you know, like each weapon has a different amount of startup time and it has a different amount of active frames and also has recovery. So you have to like balance what makes that weapon good around that. So like whenever we're thinking about attacks, we're thinking like, oh, well, this like really big sword, our big swords are called Titan swords. And we want them to have really like long wind up before their attack comes out. But then to balance that, we're like, well, let's make this deal a lot of damage. Let's give this like a really wide arc so it hits a lot of enemies at once. But then to that effect too, you can do things like make things have a really narrow angle of attack. Like if we're considering making like a rapier weapon, so that may strike multiple times, but have like a really narrow angle of attack to make it like bad at certain things, but good at different things. So that's kind of like, it's like game balance all in animation, essentially. Like you're basically just like, well, if this is too strong, let's give this more startup. Or if this isn't good enough, then let's make it snappier and let's not make players stuck in the recovery anim for so long.
And since we're going for a pace that's a little bit slower than Hades, but a little bit faster than Dark Souls, that still gives us plenty of like anticipation time to play around with. And also something that like just the average person might not think of is that as an animator, you have to be able to make a fool of yourself. Because for for the majority of our stuff, we shoot our own reference. So if I share my screen, boom, you can see here, this is just me in my old living room. And just doing that. And then we can go into a video editor and kind of edit it down to the exact amount of frames that we want. So this way we have the poses that we're hitting. We know which poses that we're trying to make, and we're looking at like silhouettes of the body, and then we're trying to transpose that onto a different character model, and then trying to get the character to read well throughout that whole text. So that's kind of the process that a lot of people don't take for granted. And then same with my own students when I'm teaching animation, like they won't shoot reference, and I'm like, dude, where's your reference? You gotta have some reference. You gotta be able to observe real life movement in order to dictate it to, or like make an animation follow it, so
yeah, I mean, with references, Mike was saying too, you get some like really nifty little details you may miss out on if you like just thought about it in your head. Like, for example, in that video that Mike was showing, like if you look at it closely, he does something different with his feet that you might not expect like a person to do when they were spinning that move. And in that case, it might not make a big of a difference, but like in certain cases, it might make a huge difference. You might come up with like a really appealing move for a character, or an appealing move for a boss that you may not have considered, that can make your game really unique.
Interesting. I also noticed that with a lot of your characters, you don't just simply say enemy target, nav mesh, go toward that enemy target, and it moves at a consistent speed, and then it gets up to a certain point, and then it starts hitting. There is kind of this state machine logic that goes into your enemies. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so one of the enemies that really is more unique is the Oho Shaman, and that's the Cyclops Shaman guy. I pulled a video of that. He's like the healer of the game currently in our forest zone. And let me find a good video of him. But what he will do is he will, like, he's basically just running, like he's trying to check to see how close you are to him. And if you are too close, then he will start running away. And then he's also checking to see if any other enemies around him are damaged. If one is damaged, he'll just try to do one heal. If multiple are damaged, he'll try to do this like AoE heal. And so we try to build things like that into our game to make players.
I got some footage of that, Don.
Okay.
I'll just roll in the background.
Yeah, hell yeah. So yeah, it's like a good way to incentivize players to like go over and attack that enemy, right? Because then you're like forcing the player to make like not the optimal decision to like roll over this pit to try to go attack these guys. So it just changes the pace of the game up in a good way. And a lot of our enemies like have things like that. Like, for example, the besides these guys, like the mage rock boy also runs away if you get too close. And his is more simple, of course. He just like runs away if you get too close. And if you corner him, then he starts to attack you. But yeah, we really think about their personalities. Like, we wanted the shamans to be like cowardly whenever they were feeling pressured, and we want the wizardling to definitely be very cowardly whenever like you're running after them. So then you put in the situation where you're like chasing after this little rock guy, and everything else in the room is like trying to kill you, So it's like things like that, I guess, we feel make the game more fun to play.
Absolutely.
You're not just like, oh, this guy's running up, he's waiting. This guy's running up, he's also waiting.
That's incredible. Yeah. And did you lean on any of your other friends and coworkers outside of just you two to be like, hey, want to bounce ideas off? What do you think, et cetera, et cetera? Did they give you expertise as well?
It's mostly just Mike and I.
Okay.
We spitball all day when it comes up with characters. Like, there's like several different characters we've come up with that haven't seen the light of day yet, but they're gonna have some really interesting things.
Is there a concept or something in programming or something that you wish you would have known before you started undertaking this game, because then you had to like go back and say, oh, I got to redo this all. I didn't know how to do this system, or I didn't know how to write it this way, and now I kind of have to, I got to backtrack a little bit.
There definitely is.
Yeah, literally all the time. Literally every time I do something, I'm like, like 75% of the way through, I'm like, I know how to do this better now. And then I have the choice to just finish it out and just have a worse functioning thing, like whatever it may be, or just redoing it. Then yeah, so it's painful. It's definitely painful.
I'm trying to think what would be a good example of that though.
Definitely when we were doing the enemy AI, because
Oh
like
yeah,
we have this enemy base sort of script that controls a lot of behavior, but that has to interact with the like mechanism state machines, you know. And a problem that we constantly fight is that like you'll have a state machine in your code that's like trying to tell them which anims to play and stuff, but then you have to reconcile that with like the mechanism state machine and try to keep those synced up and try to keep them working together cleanly. Like that's always annoying. So yeah, we're always trying to think of better ways to do that sort of stuff. Same with like we've definitely refactored the sword swing code a lot.
Oh yeah.
Like it's gone through like 3 versions now, I think, of
Yeah,
just
that thing's
completely
had
overhauled.
the thing's had triple bypass for sure.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, dude, like people don't realize it, but handling a melee combat system is like super difficult.
Yeah.
Because especially when you're dealing with like really like anims made to have a certain amount of active frames and swing a certain like speed. Because like if you just give it a hitbox, right, that's on the sword, you're gonna swing and the sword's gonna be here and then it's gonna be here the next frame. And if the character's here, well, you're not gonna hit it. So we had to come up with a way to raycast like the whole arc of the sword swing.
Yeah.
And then
at multiple points as well.
Yeah, at multiple points that like connect to each other. And so then you have to think like, well, how do I stop this from like hitting multiple times when I don't want it to? Like what happens if I do like a swing and it hits an enemy, but the sword is still going, you know? So it's like, there's so much behind a melee combat system that makes it way harder than like a projectile combat system.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Wow, wow. And just out of curiosity, like how do you guys deal with, let's say, you got 20 different enemy types. They all share some variables, some part of a class, but then there's another section of their class or their mechanism that is completely different. Like, how do you guys tackle that?
Yeah, so like Mike was saying, every character we have shares this like base enemy class that has like the base functionality of like go here, stop like this distance from player. But then we just have to make unique scripts for each one that change from that. So we'll have it inherit the things that like we need, and then from then it just gets completely unique and like sometimes like not entirely too much different. Like for example, the warrior guys that use the spears, they'll run up, but then the shaman guys like kind of have like similar behavior, so they're like a smaller branch off of that. So it's not always like a complete change, but sometimes it's just like a whole new class that needs to be made.
Wow. So give me an idea of scope of this game. Is it a hour long? Is it a 10-hour long game? Like, what is your anticipation? Is it going to be one boss, 2 bosses? Like, what's your thought here?
Well, it's a roguelike, so there's gonna be like a lot of deaths, or essentially, and playtime to completion is gonna vary from player to player because of that. So it's like whoever can get better at the fights faster, they're gonna complete the full game quicker. But like on average, it's probably gonna be about 15 hours to get your first like win, I would say, for the average player. But like each individual run would probably be like the length of a full Gungeon run, like Enter the Gungeon. So about like 1 to 2 hours per like full game run, you know. Yeah, depending on like the items and stuff that you get.
Okay. And did you guys secure a publisher yet, and or not?
So we ran a Kickstarter and that was successful. And afterwards, we're now kind of currently deciding if we want to go with the publisher or not, because like there are a lot of benefits to publishing, but there is also a lot of benefit to try to like push out a game by yourself. It's just can we do it while maintaining the proper like marketing and like porting it right and yeah, I mean, it's like having a publisher helps with those things that like we don't want to do, right? Like the social media management, the marketing side of it, the dealing with like Steam part of it.
The translating the game,
The
like
translating the game.
Localization, yeah.
localization, like that's, we don't want to deal with that. That's like so far removed from making the actual game itself, and we're like, ugh. But leading up to the Kickstarter campaign, like for years, we had to make a social media presence, so that way when we launched our actual campaign, that people would pay attention, like, oh, this game has some cool stuff to it,
Yeah, I would say that marketing was such a huge part of our like schedule every week leading up to Kickstarter, and if like a publisher would have definitely helped with that. So at the moment we're looking to talk to publishers, and we are talking to publishers, but we haven't like decided on publisher or anything yet.
It's interesting you say that, because I had another developer on, and one of the things he mentioned is he chose to go with a publisher because if he has a local publisher in, let's say, China, then he can actually get into the market there. But since because he's not Chinese, and he's not I don't know what the term is, local or whatnot.
Like he doesn't know like the culture of that area, so he can't like make finely crafted.
There's like a prohibiting of
them
distributing
in China for sure.
So if he has a publisher that's there, then that opens up that market for him. He does. But when we looked at his analytics, it wasn't like China was number one. It was all US and Europe. But it was prohibitive for him, which is interesting. Very, very cool. So, and then in a scope, like, you've got a version of the game that is testable, and you got it wishlist. When do you, and this is, if you don't want to answer that, it's totally cool, but idea wise, when do you plan on having 81 more swords created so you can finally publish and release?
For sure. So we don't have like a 100% confirmed like solid release date yet. So I mean, this game is definitely going to take us more than a year to finish. So we'll say that for sure. But it will definitely be much more in the future. So we don't have a date, but we like really just grind at the swords on the off time between like finishing major points of the game. So like right now we're seeking to because we got a lot of feedback from the demo, so we're seeking to incorporate a lot of that feedback that we've gotten, which is like to do with stuff like adding a weapon wheel, speeding up the pace of combat a little bit, removing like making like combo cancel windows more lenient. And so during the time between doing that, we usually come up with sword ideas and like model them, implement them, get something rough in there for them.
Yeah, because it's like a fun thing that we can always go back to. Like, hey, Don, check out this new sword that I made. He's like, oh man, this is sick. Or like, okay, this one's a little bit strange. Let's maybe change this, or like maybe just leave it as is and make it like a lower tier sword. It's like not as desirable. So.
Now, are you guys doing this on top of something else, or is this like your full-time focus right now for the next year?
I'm, as you can see by my name in the chat, I do teach at a college here in Long Beach. So that's my paying gig. But yeah, so then in my off time, I work on Swordcery, and if we do end up getting a publisher, then I can kind of focus more on the game, because then we'd have funds coming in, and then I wouldn't just have to, work on Swordcery in the off time,
Yeah. As for me, I'm just well versed in the struggle, man. I take on freelance gigs every now and then, but I mostly just try to live as cheaply as I can and get this thing done.
Yeah. Nice. So out of curiosity, and this is kind of like off topic. So you guys are also avid gamers, right? Like what games do you guys dig? Like what are your games that everyone should dive into?
Elden Ring. Currently,
is it that good? Is it really that good?
It's for us, because we love we love every entry of the Souls series, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when that game came out, we were like, let's take the day off, and then we just cranked on some Elden Ring and played through that. But also, as you can see from our game, stylistically, like Wind Waker was really eye opening for me as an artist, and so a lot of our stuff is like. It's not exactly cell shaded really, so it's inspired by it, but it's not like a one-to-one carbon copy of that sort of method. But yeah, those are huge ones for us. Enter the Gungeon's also a huge inspiration for this game. Yeah, anything else, Don?
Play Hades if you haven't.
Oh,
Everybody.
My gosh,
So
yeah.
good.
Oh.
Our game also takes inspiration from that. We're both also inspired by fighting games we're into. Like I'm a big Street Fighter fan, so a lot of the way I think revolves around like active frames and recovery and stuff. And Mike is also big into like Super Smash, so we definitely like take some inspiration from those games as well.
Are you guys big Evo convention goers? Have you ever been to one before?
Yeah, I usually go to Evo actually. I haven't been in a while, but I usually go.
I went to the one where Punk lost at the end.
Oh, it's Taquito?
Yeah.
That was heartbreaking. I felt so bad for him, but at the same time, I'm a big Taquito fanboy, so I couldn't be mad.
Yeah. Very cool. And would you recommend, like, out of curiosity, like, would you recommend other people who are studying to be game developers? It's okay. Take the time out to play some games. Get good at it, but
definitely.
Look at it differently. Maybe like don't look at it as I'm playing a game. I got to beat every single game out there, but study it a little bit.
Yeah, no, for sure. I 100% think you should play games and enjoy them, but also understand at the same time why you're enjoying them.
Yeah, like that's the important thing.
It's important to realize like I'm having a good time, but then like really think about, well, why am I having a good time?
Yeah.
And I would say that holds true for like any media. Like if you're ever like watching a movie and you find yourself like, oh, I'm having a good time. Like, why are you having a good time? Because that's relevant to games as well. Like you're telling a story in games, no matter like which department you're in, essentially. And anything that you can pick up from any outside media to add to that is going to be powerful.
Yeah, or just your own life experiences. Like especially as animators, like I always tell people to like analyze your friends' mannerisms. Like why if your friend reacts in a certain way to something that's like unique or strange, like file that away in your mind. Like use that in your animator's toolkit later in life, you know. Frequently we roast each other as well in terms of like there's just one day where we were always looking at each other's walk cycles in real life, and then everyone said that I swing I swing my arms unevenly, like I swing like one way more than the other, and I've legitimately had to change my walk cycle in real life because of that moment.
But I mean, that's applicable. We could use that for a boss that like does something with one arm or something, you know.
Yeah.
It's like you can put anything you find in real life into a game in some meaningful way.
Richard asked, how did you come up with the 50K budget on your Kickstarter? Like, where did that number come from?
Sure. I mean, like, we basically took a look at what we felt like not only we could hit, but also a number that we could use to make some real difference on the game. And that was like the number we arrived at, because we had, we of course have to pay a composer. We have to both stay alive, and we needed funds to pay for like the boring stuff, like an accountant, like just your overall like living expenses and stuff like that. So that's how we came up with that number. Okay. And we thought that could take us pretty far.
Okay, so you guys are industry vets that are making an indie game. A lot of students that are going to be watching this want to get into the industry. And what are your tidbits? What are your advice to breaking in?
Sure. I'll always preach. See, I know a lot more like designers are on this side of things, with your courses. But for the art side, I always preach specificity. So like, if you're going to be a good modeler, then like, don't focus on anything else really. Like just hone your craft on that. Like really dial in on that. Same with animation, same with background painting, anything.
I would also add that it's valuable to work as hard as possible whenever you're given an opportunity, because oftentimes people will remember your work ethic. And then like I've purely gotten most of my jobs from people remembering, oh, this guy like this guy does good work, he's easy to work with, and so they will recommend me for future gigs. Another thing Mike and I always talk about too is having what we call a discerning eye. And what that means is like you have to be able to look at someone else's work, and if it's better than yours, then know why it's better than yours. Like pick it apart and understand like if I'm watching like back in the day, like when I was watching like Pixar movies, I would think, well, why don't my animations look like that? And I would sit there and I would frame by frame the animation and be like, this is what looks different about my animation versus their animation. So I'd be able to like tear it apart and kind of put it back together. And I think that's accurate for any skill. Like you have to be able to understand why someone else has gotten to this level. Not because you're trying to beat them, but because you like these are the people who are like working in the industry, so you must be on their level to succeed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's say like a company like Sony Santa Monica, our students are trying to apply there, trying to get a job. What is a real expectation for them to have? No, let's say they've got 5 games under their belt, 6 games that they've developed, they've published, they pushed out. They're not God of War, but they're 5 games. They know how to program. They know how to like what would you say is a relative expectation of what they could do at a company like that?
Sure. I mean, like, I'll let Mike answer this as well, but I feel like whenever big studios look at potential candidates, they're not necessarily like, we're definitely not going to hire this person. They've never worked on AAA games. They're looking at your skill set. They want to see that even though you haven't worked on big games, that you're bringing something about they value to the table. So like if you're like looking to program AI or something like that, like it would be worth it to maybe like try to program AI that mimics something in God of War if you're trying to work at Sony Santa Monica. They will see that. And I know several people who work at Sony Santa Monica who got jobs purely because of that, purely because they like created animations that mimicked God of War, because then they know, okay, this guy's capable of similar skills. And that goes for everything, like the environment art, level design, AI, like combat design. If you can make something that targets a specific studio that you're trying to work for, definitely do that. Definitely invest your time into doing that, because they will most likely hire you for those skills.
Yeah, because they're looking for someone that can do the job, right? They're not hiring someone that they want to train a bunch, unless it's an internship. So like if you're just starting out, an internship is a great way to do that as well. That's like what I did, because they onboard you expecting that you're not going to know everything. So they'll give you support on those topics. But yeah, exactly what Don said. Yeah, that goes back to like specificity as well. Like you know what you want to do, then do it, and find studios that are looking for those sort of skills.
Do you find that and you guys work in LA, and I know the price of living in LA.
Oh
It's
yeah,
absolutely
It's disgusting.
brutal. It's just disgusting is a right term for this. But as far as like remote work goes, do you think, hey, look, guys, remote work is nice for certain studios. It's not going to work with Sony. It doesn't happen. Is that a reality for people to understand? Like, if you want to work for Sony Santa Monica, you have to live near Santa Monica.
I think right now they are working from home, like still to this day. Like I think there's been articles about that saying their process of adapting to that. But yeah, I'd say it's on a per studio basis though, because like some will require you to go to someone.
All my friends currently at their respective studios are still all work from home. And I know that a lot of studios are like more accepting of that now too. So I wouldn't be surprised if the landscape changed to be more open. I would say though, like if you're expecting to, like if you wanted to work at like Activision or Treyarch or like like Sony Santa Monica, the big AAA studios, probably expect you'll have to be local.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure there are definitely studios out there that make big games that will 100% allow you to work remotely.
Mm-hmm. Do you think,
especially because COVID stuff, now.
do you think then the time zone is more of a factor than it would be, let's say, the distance? Like if you're on a Pacific Standard Time, that's way more workable as far as long distance go than if you're on East Coast trying to do something with Santa Monica.
Yeah, I would say so. Like you could definitely adapt to that time gap, but if like you're in the UK or something,
Mm-hmm.
and the studio's in LA, then you're gonna have some problems because you're gonna be getting like pinged by your coworkers, like, "Hey, you broke the bill. Do you need to revert your changes and stuff?" So yeah.
If that's the case, like if you are in a time zone that is so different to be able to do remote work, I would suggest trying to work for outsourcing studios that are in your local area that work on AAA games.
Interesting.
So there are definitely like studios in China, studios in like Korea and like India that are used to outsource on really big projects. Like we use them on God of War.
Mm-hmm.
And for teams like that, if you're a part of those teams, then you will basically have one person you report to at the studio that will go over notes with you and like work within your time zone. So I would recommend that.
Interesting. Well, this is amazing, guys. Any last words that you can give about Swordcery? Any last advice that you can give to these students before we call it a day?
I'd just like to reiterate, analyze the work of your peers, understand who is advancing and why, and make sure that you know the steps to take to get up to that level. And also you can wish list our game now.
The plug, the last minute plug.
Very nice. And how about you, Mike? Anything?
No, that's it. You just got to be discerning. That discerning eye. That's what separates everyone. Like if you can't fix problems that you can't see. So you need to train yourself to be able to see them.
Perfect. Well, that was Don and Mike of Swordcery. Thank you guys for being a part of this. We really appreciate you coming out. Thank you everyone for hanging out. And for those who haven't seen it, the replay will be up on the Discord channel in just a second. So thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Yeah, no problem. Thank you.